Val Kilmer was born into a world that looked perfect from the outside, but felt cracked from the inside. He was a golden California kid, the kind people point at and say, that one is meant for something. Sun-bleached hair, movie star jawline, a strange, intense stillness in his eyes even when he was young, like he was always halfway between this world and some other dimension, where everything was just a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more meaningful. But behind the postcard sunshine, there was something else. Val Kilmer's story doesn't start in Hollywood. It starts with loss. It starts with a boy who never really got over the feeling that the universe could rip everything away in an instant. When Val was just a teenager, his younger brother Wesley died in a swimming pool accident. One moment, they were just boys. The next moment, one of them was gone forever. No director, no script, no second take. Wesley wasn't just his brother. He was the artist, the filmmaker, the genius with a Super 8 camera, dreaming bigger than the streets they grew up on. And in a single, brutal moment, that vision died. Val never stopped chasing it. People think Val Kilmer is a difficult actor, a diva, too intense, too method. They don't realize he isn't just acting. He's still trying to finish the movie his brother never got to make. That's the untold beginning of Val Kilmer. Not fame, not ego, grief, a wound that never really closed. Years later, when you're watching him on screen, when you see that haunted hunger in his eyes, that electric, ruthless commitment, you're seeing a man who is running as hard as he can away from a silent swimming pool. You're watching a brother who refused to let talent die in the water. Val Kilmer was not supposed to be just another actor. From the jump, he was different. He wasn't some random pretty face that Hollywood plucked off the sidewalk. He was the youngest student ever accepted into Juilliard's drama division. Think about that. Not just accepted, the youngest. That means while other kids his age were figuring out cafeteria tables and prom dates, Val Kilmer was walking into a cathedral of serious art, surrounded by obsessives, madmen, geniuses, and broken souls who worshipped the stage. He wasn't playing at acting, he was devouring it. And even there, in that crucible, he stood out as the intense one. He wrote a play. At Juilliard, while his classmates were still memorizing monologues, he wrote a full-length play called How It All Began. He wasn't just learning craft, he was already building worlds. But here's something people don't talk about. Even as he was climbing this sacred mountain of theater, Val felt like a fraud. Because there was a part of him that whispered, "This should have been Wesley." That's a ghost that followed him into every rehearsal room, every audition, every set. And when you watch him years later, refusing to phone it in, refusing to be lazy, refusing to be good enough, it's because for Val, good enough would be an insult to the dead. The first time most of the world really saw Val Kilmer, he was upside down, literally. He was Iceman, the rival, the shark, the ice-cold, smirking ace pilot in Top Gun. Tom Cruise got the leather jacket, the volleyball, the motorcycle, the hero shots. Val Kilmer got something harder. He had to make you believe there was someone on that screen who could steal the movie, without technically being the hero. And he did. He did it so hard that decades later, people still argue, who was cooler, Maverick or Iceman? But here's what most people don't know. Val Kilmer didn't want to be in Top Gun. He didn't like the script, he thought it was thin, he thought it was flashy, shallow, an excuse for jet porn. He only did the film because he was under contract with the studio. He was forced. So the guy you see on screen, the one radiating arrogant contempt, the one who looks like he's judging everyone in the room, he kind of was. It wasn't all acting. He didn't chase Top Gun. He didn't see it as the crown jewel. He thought of it as just another job. Yet even in a movie he didn't really believe in, he couldn't turn off the intensity. He built a character so iconic that he became a legend almost by accident. That's one of the unknown truths about Val Kilmer. He treated throwaway roles like sacred rituals, even when he didn't love the movie. He respected the craft. After Top Gun, you'd think Hollywood would lock Val Kilmer into one path: the pretty villain, the cold rival, the slick alpha. But that's not who he was. Val Kilmer was a chaos engine. While other actors played the game, he attacked it. He did Real Genius, where he turned a ridiculous college comedy into something weirdly sharp and alive. He did Willow, stepping into pure fantasy. And then he did something that would set the tone for the rest of his life. He stepped into the skin of an American god. Jim Morrison. The Doors. Here's something almost no one outside the industry really understands. That role almost broke him. Val didn't just play Jim Morrison. He became him. He listened to Morrison's voice. He studied the way he moved, the way he breathed, the way the madness seemed to leak out of him in slow motion. He recorded the songs himself. He rehearsed them like a man possessed. When the film wrapped, members of the Doors, people who'd known Morrison in real life, said that sometimes they forgot. They forgot it wasn't Jim. They forgot it was Val. There's a story that his own mother listened to recordings and couldn't tell which voice was Morrison's and which was her son's. That's not good acting. That's self-erasure. That's the beginning of a lifetime of disappearing into other people, and it has a cost. Because when you do that enough times, when you vanish into role after role, there's a moment where you look in the mirror and quietly ask, who am I? When nobody's looking? Then came the role that should have rewritten his destiny forever. A poet with a gun. A Southern aristocrat with tuberculosis and a death wish. Doc Holliday. Tombstone. There's a strange phenomenon in movies. Sometimes the official lead is not the real gravitational center of the story. In Tombstone, every time Val Kilmer walks into the frame, reality bends around him. The slur in his voice, the sweat on his skin, the sickly charm, the whiskey-soaked intelligence, the way you can see death sitting on his shoulder, and he still smiles like the devil knows his name. He was unforgettable. Fans quote his lines decades later, "I'm your Huckleberry." But here's the deeper truth. Val Kilmer wasn't just playing a sick man. Val was always a little haunted by death. The early loss of his brother. The volatile relationship with his own father. The awareness that everything beautiful can be ripped away. When he plays Doc Holliday, you're watching a man who has been flirting with mortality his whole life. He wasn't glamorizing it, he was making peace with it. Then came the cape, the cowl, the myth, Batman. Val Kilmer became Batman at a time when the role was less about realism and more about spectacle, rubber suits, neon lights, big sets, big names. But behind the scenes, it was suffocating, literally. The Batman suit was so rigid, so heavy, so unforgiving that he could barely hear, barely move, barely breathe. Directors would talk to him, and he could only respond in half-muffled movements. Children would visit the set, excited to meet Batman, and because he couldn't properly bend down in the suit, he couldn't kneel to their level. He was trapped in plastic. Val has talked about it. He realized in that suit, anyone could be Batman. It didn't matter what he brought internally. The mask did most of the work. For an actor who cared so intensely about soul, about nuance, about the invisible stuff that lives in the eyes, Batman was a beautiful lie. From the outside, it was the peak. From the inside, it felt hollow. This is one of the little discussed facts about Val Kilmer. He walked away from Batman not because he was crazy, but because it bored him. Most actors would have clung to the role for power, for sequels, for money, for status. Val stepped away. Not because he didn't like success, because he didn't like feeling replaceable. The world started whispering, he's difficult, he's intense, he's a nightmare on set. There were stories from the island of Dr. Moreau, where the production was chaos, directors were fired, egos clashed, and the movie fell apart in slow motion. When a film goes wrong, Hollywood loves a scapegoat. Val, with his refusal to half-ass, with his questions, with his demands for truth, became an easy target. Was he always easy to work with? No, he has admitted it. He could be stubborn, he could be obsessive, he could lose patience with mediocrity. But here's an unknown angle. He was never just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the movie. He didn't want to show up, say lines, collect a paycheck, and watch the final cut die in the editing room. He wanted greatness, and greatness is inconvenient. Behind many of the difficult labels, there are no compromise artists. Val Kilmer paid a heavy price for that. There was another side of him that the public didn't always see. Outside the movie sets, outside the red carpets, behind the larger-than-life characters, there was a man wandering through the desert, quite literally, searching for God. Val Kilmer had a deep spiritual hunger. He was drawn to Christian Science. He wrestled with faith, healing, belief, the idea that reality can be reshaped by spirit. While the world saw him as the sexy villain, the wild outlaw, the hyper-intense method actor, privately he was praying, meditating, wrestling with angels in the dark. He didn't want to just be famous. He wanted to be whole. He studied, he retreated, he explored art, painting, writing, stage performance. He bought land in New Mexico. He built a sort of sanctuary, a place where the Hollywood machine couldn't easily reach him. Most people don't realize Val Kilmer isn't just an actor. He's a painter, a writer, a poet, a deeply, almost painfully spiritual man trying to make sense of a life that came at him too fast, too bright, and too loud. Then came the thing that silenced him, literally, throat cancer. For a man whose life was made of voices, Jim Morrison's roar, Doc Holliday's slur, Batman's growl, Iceman's cool, sharp delivery, to be told, "We have to cut into your throat if you want to live," that's not just a medical decision, that's a cosmic joke. He denied it at first. For a long time, he didn't want to admit he was sick. He leaned into his faith. He believed he could heal without surgery. But cancer doesn't negotiate. Eventually, he faced the scalpel. The surgery that saved his life took his voice. His clear, rich, leading man voice became a broken, wheezing whisper carried through a tracheostomy. One of the most charismatic voices of the 1990s, reduced to a sound some people found hard to listen to. But here is the strange, almost mystical twist. Losing his voice made Val Kilmer more honest than ever. Without the old sound, without the old power, without the easy charm, he had no choice but to speak from a deeper place. Every word cost him effort, so he chose his words more carefully. And when he finally let the world see him in that condition, when he allowed himself to appear in the documentary Val, when he shared his home videos, his pain, his joy, his ego, his pride, his regret, people saw, maybe for the first time, the full human being behind the myth. Not Iceman, not Batman, not Doc Holliday, just Val. Scarred, fragile, brave, funny, childlike, haunted, grateful. One of the lesser-known truths about Val Kilmer is that he documented his life obsessively. Before social media, before everyone had a camera in their pocket, he was that guy, the one always filming, on sets, at home, with friends, with family, behind the scenes of some of the biggest movies of the 80s and 90s. Boxes and boxes of tapes, decades of his life, caught on shaky handheld footage. Not for a brand, not for clout, for something else. It's almost like he instinctively knew. One day, I won't be able to say these things, so I need proof that I was here, that I lived, that I loved, that I tried. When the documentary Val came out, people thought, oh, this is a comeback move, a sympathy piece. They missed the point. This wasn't a comeback. It was a confession. Val Kilmer pieced together a mosaic of his own existence, using childhood footage, behind-the-scenes chaos, moments of arrogance, moments of kindness, arguments, laughter, silence. He showed himself as the hero, the villain, the fool, the genius, the broken man. In a town built on illusions, he did something most stars never do. He let you see the mess. And then, in a way that felt like the universe was writing a perfect third act, something wild happened. They called him back to the sky. Top Gun Maverick. Decades later. Older. Scarred. Frail. No longer the unstoppable Iceman. In the story, Iceman is sick. In real life, Val Kilmer was too. Most studios would have been terrified to show that. To some producers, illness is bad optics. Decay ruins the fantasy. But in that one scene between Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer in Top Gun Maverick, they allowed reality to bleed into fiction. Two men, older, wiser, carrying ghosts. One can barely speak. The other is grieving the passage of time, the loss of friends, the death of an era. Iceman types on a computer because speaking is hard. He cracks jokes anyway. He smiles anyway. Then, for just a moment, he does speak. The sound is ragged, faint, cracked, but it is not weak. It is powerful precisely because you can hear the struggle in it. That scene hit people in a way explosions never could, because for once, the invincible pilot was human. For once, the cool rival had become a fragile, mortal man. And that's one of the deepest, quietest truths about Val Kilmer. His greatest performance may have been letting the world see him not as a god, but as a man who got sick and kept going. Here are things most people never knew about Val Kilmer. He almost became a priest of art instead of a star of film. He genuinely believed in theater as a kind of church. He turned down more roles than he accepted. Not because he was arrogant, but because he was chasing a specific feeling, the feeling that a story mattered. He took underappreciated roles in movies like The Salton Sea and The Ghost in the Darkness, and poured himself into them with the same ferocity he gave to Jim Morrison. He wrote poetry quietly, for years, without ever intending the world to see most of it. He painted obsessively, using bold colors and twisted text, turning canvases into battlefields between pop culture and spirituality. He was, at times, broke. People imagine big movie stars never run out of money, but Val invested in land, art, projects that didn't pay off. He was not a neat careerist. He was a gambler of the soul. He had a complicated relationship with his father, a man he both loved and resented, a man whose financial schemes dragged the family into chaos, whose death left Val holding layers of emotional debt. He struggled to be present as a father while chasing a career that demanded everything from him. And in later years, his children became his anchor. He is, beneath the persona, shy, deeply sensitive, easily wounded. And instead of building a polite, safe career, he repeatedly chose the harder path: art over comfort, integrity over PR, soul over image. There's a version of Val Kilmer's life that Hollywood likes to tell. Val Kilmer, the difficult actor. Val Kilmer, the squandered potential. Val Kilmer, the what-if. But the real version is rougher, more human, and, in its own strange way, more triumphant. Because here is a man who tasted the peak, blockbusters, costumed legends, fame, beauty, youth, then lost almost everything that the industry values: his voice, his looks, his health, his box office relevance. Yet, he did not disappear. He reinvented himself as something rarer, an elder artist, someone who has nothing left to prove, but still has something left to say. He stands on stage in one-man shows about Mark Twain. He makes art. He collaborates with his kids. He allows AI to reconstruct echoes of his old voice for certain projects, not to pretend the illness never happened, but to bridge the past and present. He accepts his scars. He laughs at his past ego. He embraces his brokenness as part of his beauty. Val Kilmer's Untold biography is not just a story about an actor. It's a story about a boy who watched his brother die and spent the rest of his life trying to honor that stolen potential. It's a story about a man who refused to settle for being a poster on a teenage wall, a man who wrestled with God, with art, with his own reflection. A man who walked away from Batman because the suit felt like a prison. A man who lost his voice but found his truth. So when you think of Val Kilmer, don't just think of the smirk of Iceman, the hat of Doc Holliday, the cape of Batman, the wildness of Jim Morrison. Think of the silence after all of that. The silence of a man who had everything, lost most of it, and chose, in the ruins, not bitterness, but creation. Val Kilmer is not a tragic figure. He is a reminder that beauty fades, fame evaporates, Health can vanish overnight. But the soul, if you keep feeding it art and love and brutal honesty, the soul can become more interesting with every wound. In a world obsessed with youth, with filters, with perfect sound and perfect image, Val Kilmer stands there, throat scarred, voice altered, face weathered, spirit intact, and whispers, in that hard-won voice, "I'm still here." That is the untold story. Not the legend, the man.